We went to 30,000 credit card debt. Like, isn't that fun? Just trying to find me a cure. And you're like getting more and more discouraged. And that's how it was trying all these natural modalities, like hope and crushed and hope and crushed. And then I take these little white pellets under my tongue. I was just like baptized by the fire of homeopathy. And I was like, this is it. This works. Homeopathy saw me through some pretty dark days. I was just like, how can I keep this to myself? There's so many people suffering, so many people need help. And I'm thinking, I need to make sure that like my grandbabies are going to be healthy. And so I'm like, I've got to teach, especially my boys, of course, my daughter, but especially my boys, because I want that knowledge to transfer into their homes.
Well, welcome, you guys. I am so excited to welcome Paola Brown to the podcast today. She's going to talk all about homeopathy, which is a topic that I know a little about. It's been on my list of something that I want to go deeper in. And today we also have Coach Jen on with us as well, because she knows a lot about homeopathy. So I'm really, really excited to open up and have this great conversation today. So Paola, can you just share a little bit about you so our listeners get to know you better? And what sent you down this path to be like, I have to create curriculum, not just teach people about homeopathy, but create curriculum around homeopathy, which makes me very excited for our listeners.
Yeah, so my mission is to help, everyone that I can come into contact with to have generational health. You've heard like that whole thing that Dave Ramsey says, like generational wealth, but we're going for generational health because the trend right now in our society is slowly but surely we're getting a little sicker, a little sicker. I mean, they have now hospice for children. They have, it used to be called adult onset diabetes. Now it's type 2 diabetes because kids are getting it so young. So we're actually as a nation working in the wrong direction. And so that was my idea. I was like, okay, I need to help reverse things. And how it started was I was very, very, very sick with multiple autoimmune diseases. I had interstitial cystitis, which is like, if you ever had like a horrible UTI, it felt like that for 7 years. Very, very painful. Had dermographia, celiac disease, hormonal issues. I had a couple miscarriages that were really tragic and heartbreaking, and just my body was just totally falling apart. And it was really scary because when things were at its worst, I remember doctors like prescribed me one medication. It was a little blue pill. And they were like, oh, you take this pill, it might help with your bladder symptoms. Because for a while, that was my worst thing. But then dermographia became my worst thing after some antibiotics. Like antibiotics just really ruined me. And so I said to them, well, what are the side effects of this pill? And they were like, well, for some women, it can make some hair fall out. For other women, it makes a lot of their hair fall out. And I'm Brazilian and I have a thick head of hair. And I was just like, Brazilians don't lose their hair. Like, that's not going to work for me. So I turned it down. Then they were like, okay, well, we can give you this device. It's like a medical device. It's not like chemical. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, to use a device. And they're like, you kind of insert this little thing like a tampon because this is for bladder pain. And you turn this dial that's like it's attached to, it's like a little metal like bullet. And you turn the dial and it electrocutes your pelvis. And then you just turn it up as high as you can. And then after the it's like basically electric shock therapy. After this, your nerves are so tired that they just don't experience the pain as much. And I was just like, what? No, I'm gonna pass on the torture device. Then the last one, they were like, well, we can have you join and you can take opioids, but I make all my girls join a support group for the addiction.
Whoa.
I know.
Oh my
I was
goodness.
like, yeah, I was like, this is horrifying. Who are you? And I was like, no, I'm not doing any of these. And what was so cool is my doctor like reached across the table and she like basically put her hand next to mine and she says, good, then you'll do it right. There's a cure out there for you. You just have to find it. And like, there's a lot going on. I'm like 20 nothing at this time. I have two kids. And I was just like, why didn't she say that from the beginning? Like, why did she offer these treatments and yet like she wouldn't do it herself? Like, so then it just kind of was like, what does that mean? What does that tell me about the medical system I'm participating in? What does this all mean? But then I was in tons of pain. I was literally peeing blood. It felt like
Oh.
someone took my bladder, lit it on fire, turned it inside out, and put it out with a track shoe. That's what it felt like for 7 years. And I was on this really intense autoimmune protocol, paleo diet, which did keep the pain at bay. I was very thankful for that, but I was starving. I was really hungry. I felt like kind of like anorexic because they say when you have like an eating disorder, you think about food all the time. That's what I felt like. I was constantly like, how can I eat more food and like try and get more calories in me? I was so thin. And I tried everything, everything, everything. Then I find homeopathy. And I'm not kidding, within a month, I'm seeing massive improvements. And I've gone 7 years trying all the natural stuff like acupuncture, and all these things are good, like all the supplements, the herbs, the and what's it called? NAET. It's a type
Mhm.
of like acupuncture with laser, cold laser. Just I tried all these different things. I flew to California, I flew to Maryland, I flew like all over the country. We spent $30,000 of our own money. We went to 30,000 credit card debt. Like, isn't that fun? Just trying to find me a cure. And then I take these little white ball pellets, and under my tongue. And I remember like the first time my homeopath at the time prescribed a remedy for me, nothing happened. And so like a month later, and you're like getting more and more discouraged. And that's how it was trying all these natural modalities, like hope and crushed and hope and crushed, like this cycle of just being crushed. So the first time, and I had this rule, like try at least for 6 months or like 3 to 4 good follow-ups with whoever I'm working with to see if there's a shift. And so I went back the second month, got a new set of remedies, didn't work. Went back the third month, got a new set of remedies, and suddenly I just had like little weird things happen. Like one of the problems with interstitial cystitis is that your bladder is so swollen. It's like a mucous membrane. So think about like being stung by a bee, how you get so swollen so quickly. My bladder was really, really swollen. So I always felt like I had a pee because it was just swollen and it couldn't hold a lot of fluid. And so one day I remember I was on these remedies and I had to go to the bathroom and I was expecting the typical, quarter, I mean, an eighth of a cup of urine. And I went and it was like 3 cups or whatever. I
Oh,
don't know. I didn't measure it.
that's a
But I
lot.
was just like, what the heck just happened? It hurt. I mean, everything was kind of not too different, but it did hold more urine. And then it was just like by the end of the year, like within 12 months, the only time my bladder kind of bothered me was around my period. And even that's gone, you know?
That's amazing.
So I was just like baptized by the fire of homeopathy. And I was like, this is it. This works. Then I had, so it was helping with my chronic stuff. But one of the things I had learned is the damage that antibiotics and any medications really, but especially
Mhm.
antibiotics, steroids, NSAIDs, like all these things just wreak havoc on our guts. And so I was really committed to like never, ever, ever again taking an antibiotic. And sure enough, I get strep throat, had a very serious case of it. Like it was medieval. It was pretty bad and pretty serious. To anyone else, if they got that sick, I would tell them, get thee to a hospital and take the penicillin. But I was just at this really serious crossroads with my health where I couldn't handle another round. And homeopathy saw me through some pretty dark days. And after that, I was just like, how can I keep this to myself? There's so many people suffering, so many people need help. And so just kind of one thing led to another. And I do have a master's in curriculum and instruction. So I'm homeschooling my kids and I'm thinking like, I need to make sure that like my grandbabies are going to be healthy, because it's like a running joke. I always talk about my future grandbabies. My oldest is 17. Like, not, it's not time. But like anyways, so I'm just always like I'm actually campaigning in my household to have a grandbaby named after me. And
I love that.
it's kind of, yeah, it's this unspoken thing about like, you might see that some of the inheritance goes to your siblings, but a lot of it might go to you if you name a kid after me. So it's like it's this running joke that we have. And so I'm already like campaigning for healthy grandbabies. And
I
so,
love that.
I have 2 boys and a daughter. pretty sure it can have a lot of influence on my daughter, but like those wives, I'm the mother healer of our home. I'm the one that decides on what gets poked into them, what gets put in their mouths, what kind of medications they take, how are we going to handle fevers. And so I'm like, I've got to teach, especially my boys, of course, my daughter, but especially my boys, because I want that knowledge to transfer into their homes. And what I find is if you don't do something intentional and you just kind of like osmosis, like mention it here, mention it there, it doesn't sink in. You have to be intentional. Your kids have to do the work. They have to think, they have to read and own that for themselves. So that's kind of how the homeschooling program came about.
Paola, amazing. Oh my gosh, I've homeschooled my kids some, not 100%. And looking back, you can always look back and be like, oh, I'd have done it differently. But I love that you have homeschool curriculum because I think it is so important. You've said so many things. I'm like, what direction do we want to go? But I want to reiterate something you did say because I do this with my kids. And I know Jen does as well, being very intentional. And this is something I've done with my kids with food, with supplements, whatever it is. I don't just give it to them. I'm like, I teach them why, the why behind it. So then their little brains are like, oh, this is good for this. This is good for that. And now that I finally am getting my kids like swallowing capsules, it took a long time for us to get there because my oldest is 17, almost 18.
Great.
And I never just give them something. I always am showing them. Number one, 'cause I think it's really important that you always know what you're putting in your body. I show them, here's what I'm giving you today. Like this is the multivitamin. This is, whatever it is. And we do some homeopathy stuff as well. And it's always so funny. I remember like when my youngest, although I think we correlated outside of braces, of course, that I think gluten was causing some canker sores for her. I finally connected the dots because our house is 100% gluten free, but my girls up until the last like year and a half were eating gluten periodically. And I think I'd finally correlated the dots for her anyway, but we would do like the homeopathy like stuff for canker sores. And she was always like, Mom, I don't understand it, but these seem to help my canker sores heal so much better. Like it's really cool when I start to hear from my kids. They're free thinkers, they're thinking, you're putting these pieces out there for them, educating them. And then when you start hearing them regurgitating stuff back to you or saying something to my husband or another sibling, I'm like, oh, they really are like, they're getting this. And they're so much more aware of their bodies when you have these conversations around food and nutrition and supplementation and all of it. It's so cool. I just like really want to send that point home to because we have so many moms listening that I just think that is so important. And as you learn things, right? Mom's like, I know so much more now than when my kids were little. And speaking of grandbabies, like I think of that stuff too. I'm like, we're not there, obviously, but we are helping to have healthier generations in our families because we are teaching as we learn this stuff, we teach our kids, and then you just pray and hope that it continues on down. So anyway, I love that
Yeah.
you mentioned that. I think it's so
Yeah,
important.
exactly. And, I actually had a really transformative experience with my 17-year-old who was at the time 15. So, quick story, he got poison ivy. At the time, we thought it was impetigo, very similar. It kind of formed like a honey colored crust. Then it would crack open and then it would weep and then it would spread. And at the time, we thought it was impetigo. We'd never actually experienced poison ivy before, so that was kind of new to us. And it spread up and down his legs, up his torso, going towards his chest, and it was gnarly looking. And I was like, for a minute there, convinced he had flesh-eating bacteria because we were in Texas at the time, which like it's a thing there. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So like I took him to the doctor, and it was really good to go to the doctor. We have a great doctor, very doesn't even accept insurance because he feels like, he's just a regular doctor, but he feels like he's forced to do things that by having insurance that he normally wouldn't have done. So just really great doctor. And so they just like pressed on his scabs and his wounds and they were like, "Does this hurt?" And my son was like, "No, it doesn't." So they determined that whatever it was, it wasn't serious. Like it wasn't a deep infection going deeper into the tissue, causing cellulitis, causing like secondary infections. And they're like, "Okay, it's just ugly as sin. It's not serious. Here's some steroids because or antibiotic cream. They wanted to put antibiotic cream. They actually ordered me like 5 tubes because the antibiotic cream tubes are small. They ordered me like 5 tubes of antibiotic cream and they're like, off you go. So we're driving home and I'm thinking, okay, well, you're not going to die. So like, let's just wait this out. Like he was kind of been sitting in bed for about a week. going on a week in like a couple days. And so I know he was miserable. He was missing some basketball and stuff, but you got this 15-year-old kid. And you can be like, I'm going to force you to do it my way. We're not going to do the antibiotic cream. We're going to, or if you've been teaching him about principles of true health up until this point, I was like, okay, we've got a choice here. Again, we thought it was impetigo at the time, and impetigo is typically staph or strep bacteria, which staph loves to become MRSA, very antibiotic resistant. And so we're driving. And so my son was like, okay, so antibiotic cream, how do we feel about that? And I'm like, well, it's antibiotics. He's like, yeah, I know it's not good for you. He's like, but what's going to happen? I'm like, well, staph loves to become MRSA. So if we put the antibiotic cream now, the likelihood of this coming back is pretty high. And it'll come back when you're 90 and kill you. Just telling him that. And he was like, oh my gosh. And he's like, so you're saying after everything I've been through, I can do the antibiotic cream and it'll still come back? And I'm like, well, your buddy Jake from basketball, he's like, yeah. I'm like, well, he gets impetigo every single year. And every single year he has to go on a round of antibiotics when it's Houston, so it's like warm and humid, and that kind of triggers impetigo. And so he was like, so you're saying I can go through this and it's just going to come back if I use the antibiotic cream? I'm like, yep, that's what I'm saying. And he was just like, no, I'd rather suffer with this for another week. And we were working with our homeopath, trying to find the right homeopathic remedy. So obviously we were doing that, but we were kind of failing. And I think it's because we all thought it was impetigo and not,
Mhm.
that would have been helpful information, not poison ivy. And the trouble is you go to the doctor, like nobody lets poison ivy go this far, like spread this much. So they were like, I don't know, I've never seen anything like this before. Like this is wild. So he ended up not doing it. I don't know if we found the right remedy or not, or if his body had just pushed out the toxic oil from the poison ivy and just kind of was done. But
Mhm.
I think he spent like another week. It started to recede. It went away. It got better, got better, got better. And his body worked it out. And then what was so cool, what was kind of crazy, like a year later to the date, he had a few spots show up in exactly the same spots. And he was not exposed to poison ivy. And he was like, I thought you said this would never come back. And I'm like, well, healing is complicated, but sure enough, it came back just like nothing. Like it was a tiny scab, like the size of like a dime or a nickel. And then it receded again. And so I like to believe that next time he gets exposed to poison ivy, his body's a little bit smarter, a little bit better at dealing with it, a little less susceptible. Because some people get poison ivy and their like eyes are swollen, their face is swollen, like they need like intervention. And that's really how our bodies work. Whenever we suppress an illness, poison ivy, impetigo, whatever it is, and this is a huge principle in homeopathy, whenever we suppress, we're driving that weakness deeper, not allowing our body to purge it and not allowing our body to learn from it. But if you don't suppress, in this case, I'm not even sure if homeopathy worked, but his body ultimately worked it out. Whether the homeopathy encouraged his body to do it or whether he just did it on his own, um, he overcame it. And you do become less susceptible. I mean, we all know this. Like you get a
Yeah.
cold, you overcome it. You don't get that cold again. That's why kids get more colds than adults, right? But the whole idea is to not suppress. So, like my strep throat experience that I mentioned a little bit ago, I've been exposed multiple times. I drink it from the same cup as someone who the next day told me they had strep, and I never got it again.
Mhm.
Not saying I won't ever get it again because the virus or whatever, the bacteria, I mean, can change, but I'm going on 15 years and nothing's
Yeah.
happened. So,
Well, yes, I think this is the biggest thing. And in this go, 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 fast-paced world we live in here, it's like, oh, I'm sick. Oh my God, how dare my body get sick? I have to keep going. I have to push through, get an antibiotic to like get better. And
yep.
like I like to phrase it as, and I tell my kids this all the time whenever they get sick, which isn't very often, fortunately, right?
Mhm.
And I remind us whenever we get sick, it's our body building up its immune system.
Yes.
And like when you, and I try to tell my clients that too. It's sometimes some of them embrace it easier than others. But it's hard to slow down when you're like, I've got all this stuff to do. But it's like if you can embrace the fact that your body is building up its immune system because it was exposed to something a little bit new, a little bit different than it has been before, I swear you heal faster. It's like a mindset shift because instead of your nervous system trying to fight it and be like, how dare I get sick? I do all these things to not get sick and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, you know what? It's going to happen from time to time. The more that you build up your immune system, the less you do get sick. You know what I mean? And it's like, if we take all this junk, then then you get sick more often. I don't know. That's what I see. So
It's
anyway.
100%. Actually, this is one of the principles I teach in my curriculum. Health is not defined by never getting sick. Health is defined by your ability to overcome illness without being propped up by a bunch of drugs.
Mhm. I
That is
love
health
that.
because you're right. Sooner or later, everybody's going to get sick. And I love people say, oh, I never get sick. And I'm like, you're actually on a ton of medications and you have all this like chronic stuff and steroid creams and Humira, whatever. And like, well, I never get sick. I'm like, actually, it's good for you to get sick because you're exercising your immune system. And on the backside of that, you are healthier. And that's truly, and I think like what you were saying about the emotional side of illness, I think that's why so many people got sick with that, that thing that went around back in 2020. Everybody was so freaked out. Everybody was so terrified. And I know that that level of fear
Mhm.
drops your immune system. It's all
Absolutely.
part of this bigger picture that we just pretend like it's not there.
Yeah. Don't be scared to be sick, you guys. That is so well said because it's like going into like I always see like more people get sick when school gets started, right? Because not everybody's together. Or it's like we
Yeah.
going into winter because we're not outside enough. And I just tell my kids like stay hydrated, lots of sleep. We boost up our immune system with good quality food and supplementation. And you know what? If you guys get sick, well, stay home and rest. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And I think that's a big thing. And not to go on a tangent here, but like they changed our school system with absences. And so it's like now to get an excused absence, you have to have a doctor's note. I'm like, doctors are already so overwhelmed. Why would I take my kid to a doctor just because I need to stay home and rest to get better faster? And it's a whole thing. And anyway, we'll see how it
The
plays out as
system
they
used to be
continue doing
better.
it.
Like doctors would visit you in your home, like instead of like dragging you to like with all the other sick people to spread, it's just like
Well,
it's
most of the time you don't even need to go to the doctor
right.
when you're sick.
You're right.
This is a very there are things you need to go to the doctor for, but
Sure.
which is why medicine can be great for certain things, but for most things we just need to rest. Rest and hydrate, and it's amazing what those things can do for our body. Okay, because I want to get talking about, kind of mentioned the medical system, I want you to share with us the history of homeopathy and medicine, because I think this is fascinating, and how it's been becoming less and less and less, right? Because we've got more of other things, big you know what, that's come in and. Anyway, I'll let you just share about the history. How about that? You want to talk
Yeah,
about
no,
that?
that's great. It's a really cool history. So homeopathy is like, I mean, I should say that herbs are technically like the original natural medicine, but like as far as like medical medicine goes, homeopathy was like the first like naturopathic like medicine. So it started in the late 1700s. There was this guy named Samuel Hahnemann, a medical doctor, and he had gone to medical school and he was doing all the things that you did back then. So like a little what was it called? Arsenic here, a little bloodletting over there. And he was just one of his gifts was just pure and simple observation. He felt like if I do something, I have to observe to see if that thing helped or if it made it worse. And he started to notice pretty quickly that he was killing his patients. Back then the bloodlust for leeches for draining someone's blood. I mean, some of that is actually good. When you donate blood, they say it's good for your body, it renews your blood and everything. But to the extreme that they were doing it back then was quite bad. And he felt the poisons he was administering were quite bad. And so he actually kind of quit medicine and he had a large family, lots of kids, and he decided to translate medical texts. And then over time, he's reading these medical texts, he's translating, and he's beginning to kind of notice that maybe there is a way to use these medicines when they're toxic, but as long as they're highly diluted and made non-toxic. So, so he started to study this law of similars. Basically, the law of similars is okay, if I was in a kitchen with you guys and it's a tiny little kitchen and I were to chop up an onion, we would develop some symptoms from like overexposure to onion, right? We would have watery eyes, runny nose. And Hahnemann was very detailed on the quality of all the symptoms. So he'd want to know, like, do your eyes burn? Is the runny nose clear or like green? So he was very particular. And then he would say, well, what makes the symptoms better or worse? So if we were in a small little room chopping an onion, we would probably step outside to get some fresh air and to get away from that. Or, you might notice, oh, I'm super thirsty. You might have just like these weird symptoms that come with it. So then he said, okay, if you're sick and if your illness mimics those of that original substance, like onion, then it will stimulate a cure in you. So, for example, if you have a cold that produces drippy eyes, watery, runny nose, and for whatever weird reason, when you open the window or step outside, you kind of like improve, like your nose clears up a little bit. Well, that would be an allium cepa, which is Latin for onion, an allium cepa cold, and you would take the highly diluted form of onion. It's so diluted, it's non-toxic. You would take that and it would stimulate your body to cure it. So homeopathy is essentially like a matching game where you have like, here are my symptoms I've observed. I have a good set of symptoms. I really understand them. And I'm going to try and match that to a homeopathic remedy that will resonate. And so what the remedy does, this is kind of cool. People are always like, well, how does it work? Like if the onion is so diluted that like it's actually not even like there's no chemical onion left over. It's not like an herb. It's highly diluted in a special process that Hahnemann discovered. Like, how does it work? And this is the only way I can explain it. Let's say, Erica, you have seasonal allergies, egg white, runny nose, watery eyes, and for whatever weird reason, you actually improve when you go outside. So allium cepa would be a good remedy for you. So it's like your immune system. If your little immune system could talk to you, it would say, Erica, we're so sorry. We do not know how to fix these allergies. I know you're miserable, but we're like down here and we're reading the manual and we don't know what to do for you. Like we're so confused. And it might be that you took antibiotics in the past and the antibiotics like deleted the manual for your body. And they like, there goes the beneficial gut bacteria that knew how to do that. Like, nope, we're dead. We can't help you, right? So then you take the homeopathic form of onion and then your little immune system is like, oh my gosh, guys, forget the allergies. We're being attacked by an onion because this is like tiny nanoparticles, kind of like our body is good at seeing viruses or pollen or tiny, tiny things. You take this onion and your body sees these tiny little like holograms of an onion, and your body goes, everybody, stop worrying about the allergies. We're being invaded by an onion. So your body mounts a defense to the onion, but actually there's no onion attacking them. It's just these tiny little bits of it. And what does that attack end up being perfect for?
Allergies.
The allergies.
Oh.
So it's kind of tricking your body into stimulating a cure by introducing a false disease that mimics it. And people will say, well, why don't you just take like the homeopathic, like if you're allergic to pollen or whatever, why don't you take the homeopathic form of pollen? I'm like, well, your body already doesn't know how to do pollen. Why give it like nanoparticle pollen? It's still going to be like, thanks a lot. We don't know what to do with this. We're still confused. But if you bring a different one that kind of tricks it, it might figure it out, and then it can clear out the problem.
Thank you for that explanation. That is
You're
very
welcome.
helpful. That was very helpful for me. It's like I feel like I know a lot over here, and I'm like, I really like that. That was a very good story explaining that.
You. Thank you. So that was Samuel Hahnemann. I don't know if he discovered it like that, but he did have this really cool quote where he says homeopathy introduces a false disease to stimulate a cure. And I was like, there it is. So he was a smart guy, really, really intelligent. And it's just so cool that his medicine has lasted over 200 years and has blessed just so many people.
That's amazing. So it started out in medicine and it has been used for a long time. And when have we seen a big shift of it not being recommended in medicine?
Well, there was a golden age in the United States of homeopathy. There was a few homeopaths that traveled mostly from Germany, because that's where Hahnemann was from, to the US. But it wasn't until this man named Constantine Herring, who I have a massive crush on, that came to America, that he was just this charismatic. He had the riz, as my kids would say. He had, all this personality, and he just made it thrive. And for a while there, 50% of the hospitals in the United States were purely homeopathic. It was purely
Mm.
practiced by medical doctors. There was homeopathy medical schools. Actually, the medical school in Philadelphia used to be called the Hahnemann Hospital and the Hahnemann Medical School. I forget the exact name, but over time it's like changed the names and stuff. But there was a golden age of homeopathy, and it was, besides herbs, it was pretty much the only natural medicine in the United States. But then you have the whole like, Flexner report, big money, big, opportunities. And, I think I heard RFK Jr. say recently, like the most profitable thing in America is a sick child. And
Mhm.
I think that just it just comes down to it. Like there's not a lot of money in true cures.
Right.
Um, because then you don't have a client.
Right.
And
Because once you're better, like we don't need to spend all that money on all
yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah, and I think what's so cool about the time that we live in, like there's a lot of darkness and a lot of like challenging things if you look at like our political system or whatever. But what's so cool is we have podcasts like yours where you are bringing just little bits of the truth where before, back then you would just have the newspaper and if they were being truthful or
Mm.
not or, whatever. And I think that's what happened is there wasn't enough independent outlets for people to make their own decisions, that homeopathy almost died in the United States after having this huge, wonderful, amazing time in the 1800s and early 1900s. It almost died. And this is so cool. The ones who saved it and brought it back were mothers,
Mm.
because we're kind of the boots on the ground, right? With our
Yeah.
kids when they're
Yeah.
sick, it's what helps, what doesn't help, and yeah. So really I like to say it's mother's true medicine. I do believe you should have a family homeopath for chronic things, for acute conditions that do get, like my strep throat story was technically an acute, but it was quite complex. Probably should have not navigated that on my own. Um, and so I really think that it is mother's medicine. And I really feel that mothers are the healer in the home. We are mother healers, and we need to own that right and learn what we need to learn to defend our children from illness and someday my grandbaby's little Paola. So
I love that.
yeah.
Jen, I want to pull you in here. Of everything that we've talked about, is there any questions that you have kind of come up that you'd like Paula to talk a little bit more about, or something from your perspective?
I just love hearing the stories. Like I recently have been fighting a cold. It was all in my lungs. It's the stuff where most people, like in the past, I would have just gone to the doctor, gotten the antibiotics because it was stuck in my lungs. Pretty sure self-diagnosed walking pneumonia, but I was like, I'm not. So I did. So in your second curriculum, you talk about the three-legged stool, which I
Yes.
love, where so how she talked about with if you have the onion, you've got the watery eyes, you've got the runny nose, you go outside, it makes you feel better. So that's like the three legs of a stool for how you figure out what kind of a remedy you need. So every day I was like, okay, I have this symptom, this symptom, this symptom. Okay, this looks like this. And so I tried probably two other remedies until I finally settled on one that was helping the most to kind of pull it out, but it wasn't just doing it enough. And I had actually texted Erica and I'm like, "Ugh, I'm dealing with this. I don't want to go to the doctor. What am I missing? Because I've got like a lung tincture I'm taking." And she goes, "Put red light on your chest." And I was like, oh, duh. So with the homeopathy and the red light, 2 days later, it just pulled the crud out of my lungs when my doctor was like, "No, I'm going to put you on antibiotics." And I was like, no,
Mm-mm.
my gut's already
Mm.
messed up. I don't need to add to it. And so, but I loved hearing the story you just said about like how the mothers brought it back. And I didn't realize, even with what I've been learning, that we introduce a different kind of invader. So the body goes after that and then figures it out. So I really loved learning about that.
Yeah, I think it helps the guys really get on board because they're like, if it doesn't make sense to them, like even though like they actually do live life not knowing things, like they think they do, And so when I go to like the homeschooling conferences, I really try and explain like how it works, and they're like, okay, I can wrap my head around that, so we can try it. But yeah, the three-legged stool is a really easy. This is Constantine Herring, my little crush from the 1800s. He taught the three-legged stool method. So you kind of, when you're sick, you have a whole constellation of symptoms and you try and identify like what are your top worst symptoms. You might come up with like three or four: headache every time I cough. My chest hurts so bad when I cough, I have to hold it still. I'm super thirsty. I'm grumpy. I'm not, if you're normally grumpy, it doesn't count. It's only like new symptoms while you're sick. So if you're normally a happy person and you're grumpy right now, then that counts as a symptom. Otherwise, that's just you being yourself. So you kind of look at all the symptoms. And so thirsty hurts, my head hurts, I might have to hold my chest, it hurts so bad. I'm grumpy. And then you go online, Erica. You're going to just Google, or sorry, DuckDuckGo, homeopathy for coughs. And then there's going to be all these random articles that come up. Like this is like the cowboy homeopathy way of figuring out a remedy. So you're going to do a DuckDuckGo homeopathy for coughs, and then you look for an article that lists like 5, 6, 10 remedies for coughs, like top remedies. Then you're going to start reading them one by one. Oh, there's antimonium tart, really wet. Sounds like you're coughing up water, like, really, really wet. You're like, that does not sound like me. Oh, I have a pretty dry cough. Then you keep reading, and then you're reading about aconite. Like this comes on suddenly, and maybe the night before you were out in the cold wind, and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound like me. Then you go to bryonia, and bryonia says this is the remedy that is known for worse from movement. And when you have a cough, people might hold their chest because they don't want their chest to move. It hurts so bad. You tend to be thirsty. Bryonia is sometimes called dryonia because people are so thirsty when they need it. And then you might have a splitting headache. And then suddenly you're like, oh, this remedy bryonia kind of sounds like. So you have three legs of the stool. Your three of your worst symptoms match up with three keynotes of the remedies. So you match them and you try it, and then boom, you get better.
I love
So,
it. Okay, so I have to ask you more about your curriculum, and I know you have a program, it sounds like, for moms. I'm very interested in all this. I love this stuff. I actually in the studio want to start carrying homeopathy products. It's been on my list to get. We just haven't quite got there yet. Because I've created 3 instructor training courses in the last year. So like it's a lot of work to create curriculum. And I'm like, okay, well, we gotta start weaving this in. So can you talk a little bit about like your curriculum for homeschooling? Is that something that, even though I'm like, I'm not really homeschooling my kids, but it's something Jen has, is that all of it? Is it like an online course, a booklet? I guess I have a lot of questions. Just tell me all about it because I want to know, as do moms listening.
okay. So, I wrote, Jen, like maybe you can chime in too, but I wrote this curriculum in a way that if you knew, like Jen, did you know anything about homeopathy before my program?
Uh, I like to think I did, but then once I started reading, I was like, oh, I just got lucky with some things.
Right. Okay. So it's designed to introduce moms to homeopathy if you know like nothing. And so the best teacher is story. I'm a big fan of story. So it is literature based. So the teacher's manual, there's like the teacher's manual, which is a book that tells you when to read a chapter from the storybook, and it guides you through like, okay, read this chapter, then have this discussion and do this little art project or this little food activity or whatever. And then that's lesson 1. Then lesson 2 will be like, okay, set the book aside and we're going to do some exercises to dig deeper in the principles that you learned in the last reading. And I actually have an audiobook too because I am not the read aloud mom. Like, I don't know why I can't breathe and read at the same time. Like I have no air. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I will I have a really great audiobook artist that actually that's a cool story too. Like I had like someone do it and I wasn't really happy with the performance. I'm like, whatever, she's affordable. And we were listening to this book, Rebecca Cottle's book, my daughter and I were, and Eva was like, Mom, you should get this lady to do it. I'm like, she is a Random House, like faint, like she's famous, like she has like real clients. She's not going to be able to do it. And even if she does, I won't be able to afford her. And Eva was like, Mom, just ask her. So I emailed this woman and I'm like, hey, would you be willing? Probably not, to do my books on homeopathy. And she was like, not only is homeopathy the only medicine that I use, but I would love to do it for you at a 50% discount or something big like that. And I was just like, no way. So even the narrator of my book is, or the actress is homeopathy. But anyway, so the second and third lessons typically will just go deeper, and we have activities like, for example, you are going to learn to read the side effects of a drug label. Like this is something every adult should do. And then in the fourth lesson, you go back to reading a chapter from the storybook. And then I did kind of design it to be a one-room schoolhouse approach. I know families have multiple children, sometimes a first grader, a seventh grader, and a high schooler. So what I did to kind of make it one-room schoolhouse is I have 3 workbooks. So you only select and purchase the workbooks that you need yourself for the kids you have. So if you have a level 1 and a high schooler, you would get a level 1 and a level 3, like a first grader and a high schooler. And so like, for example, for the assignment where they're reading drug labels, the first grader is going to get a very simple drug label of acetaminophen. And they're, instead of jaundice, I say yellow skin. Instead of, you know, diarrhea or whatever, I might say watery poop, and then they color the side effects on the little human body of like what these drugs will do. The high schooler gets a more advanced version of that where they're actually required to research the drugs, make a list of the side effects, and they get 3 drugs because they're learning about polypharmacy and compounding side effects. And high schoolers like to color too. So they'll color the side effects onto the human body, but it's on a human body that has the anatomical position. So they've learned a little bit about, oh, what's his face? The guy that did the Vitruvian Man, the famous person. I can't think
Oh,
right now. I should know.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah, I don't
Italian.
know.
Anyways, he's Da Vinci. Da Vinci.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they learn about Da Vinci and how he kind of did the anatomical man and what that was all about. So it's nice that you can teach your whole family. And that's what's so lovely about story is, when you tell a fable to a child, um, they get what they need to get. Like as an adult, hearing that story of the emperor's clothes, about how the emperor gets tricked into wearing air, and then he's walking down the street and everybody points and says, or a child points and says, "You're naked." And how everybody like believed this falsehood that was peddled as being life-saving and wonderful. It kind of reminds me of like the 2020 years, when they were talking about certain things that I wasn't super comfortable with. And if you didn't do it, you were an idiot, So it takes on a whole nother form, story does, as you
Yeah.
mature and you're ready to listen to what you're ready to listen to. So
Yeah, I love
and
that.
the story, you guys, the story is golden. Your ability to storytell is probably one of my favorite things. You just like, I don't want to put the book down when it says, okay, now go to the lesson. I'm like, no, I need to know what is going on next. It's so good. But you've also written a book club version. So,
yes.
like for women or moms who aren't teaching it to their kids or they don't have kids, you have a book club version so the curriculum looks different than curriculum.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because I had a lot of moms reading this book and they're like, this book isn't just good for my, seventh grader, fourth grader. It's been so good for me. And they're like, could I do like a book club with moms and we read this book together? And I said, yeah, sure. So I did. So the book club program is basically, I'm actually rebranding it. It's going to be called The Mother's Guide to Homeopathy. But basically you have the storybook, the same book, because that storybook, I have 2 curriculums. The first storybook is called Evie and the Secret of Small Things, and the new one that I came out that's digital and it's actually in the vault right now, so I'll reopen it later. But it's called Evie and the Golden Homestead. So there's 2 different storybooks. But the idea is that I wrote an adult companion that pairs with the storybook. And that adult companion, basically, you read the storybook and then you shift into the kind of guided lessons for moms. So I haven't done one for my second program that just came out. I haven't done the adult guide to that, but I will be. But right now I have it for my first program, which is Evie and the Secret of Small Things. So in that adult program, you're going to be reading about the history of homeopathy. You're going to be learning about 19 different homeopathic medicines, like the 19 that you should memorize and know like that. Like you learn them. I teach you guys case taking. I give you sample cases of like just different things that I've encountered as a mom and I've been able to select remedies for. And anyways, and the goal is for you to just really own these remedies. And I felt like it was a bit much to teach children like extensive case taking, you know. So that's where like the mother's guide gets kind of the next level up that the kids didn't necessarily get.
Well, I love this. I'm in. I need to learn all of this. I'm always all for learning new things. So I think it sounds amazing. I think moms, ladies listening, I think if you're wanting to add more things to your toolbox, I think it's great. I also think too with homeopathy, right? It's really easy to take. It's really easy for kids to take because you're just putting them under your tongue and letting them dissolve. You're not having to swallow pills, which is something that we've had to deal with in my house.
Yeah. I
You
have a kiddo that
know,
can't swallow pills either. It's hard for him. So yeah.
yeah. So this to me, it seems like a really, really, I mean, it on its own can be amazing. And I'm also one of those people that like, I love to like, how can we combine the best of the best for whatever is, whatever is needed. So I think this is amazing. Jen, is there any last things you want us to ask Paula that we haven't talked about?
Well, the funny thing is it's actually one of the quotes from your second curriculum, but the proof is in the pudding. Like, sometimes the husbands are the hardest to sell on this. My husband's all in. This is what he reaches for. He knows that this is what helps better than the Advil, the Tylenol. Oh, I shouldn't say anything. All the others over the counter stuff. And my kids, they know it works too. When something goes wrong, they come and they tell me what the issues are, and then we figure it out from there. And they know it. And it's so easy. There's no fight to try to get something in them. I don't ever have to worry that I'm suppressing a fever. I let the fever do its work, and the kids know that they want the fever to do its work, and this is the reason why. And this is the reason why we rest more. Um, and then even for moms who want to dive deeper and figure things out so they can help their kids, Paula, you also have the Mommyopath, um, not curriculum, but it's the membership. Do you want
Yeah.
to talk
So
about that?
yeah, so it'll open up again in January, probably at the time of this recording. Although my curriculum is going to go on sale like Black Friday stuff. So let me say this. If you want to try just teaching your kids and learning with your kids together, that's fine. Go to paolabrown.com/free. So my name is Paola brown.com. So it's like Paula, but the U's and O. So Paola brown.com/free. And you can get three complete free lessons. You're going to learn about fevers. It's a really good set. And I even have a preschool and kindergarten primer. You can get free lessons for your little ones. But we basically want you guys to kind of experience it and learn it with your kids. But then what started happening is I had moms be like, okay, I did your whole program, but I'm not you. Like, you know stuff that I don't know, Paula, and I want to be you. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. So I came up with this word called mommyopath, which is like homeopath and mom
Love
combined.
it.
And it's just like a membership where we meet every Monday night for an hour. And there's a few goals of that. So the first goal is for you to get exposure to really high quality homeopaths. I really feel to round out your experience with homeopathy, it's good to have a family homeopath to help you through the stuff. Because what ends up happening is people like learn homeopathy, dabble in it, then they'll get a walking pneumonia like Jen did, but Jen was able to figure it out, but they're not able to figure it out. Then they end up on antibiotics. And I'm like, no, there needs to be like someone to help you, to kind of create that barrier between you and those antibiotics. And so that's where a homeopath will come in. And so that's the first goal, is to expose you, because I bring a homeopath and we spend every Monday night, except for the first one, with that homeopath. So you get to know them for a whole month. We have a session every month called Confidence Clinic. And we have one called Symptom Solver. So Symptom Solver is where we teach you, like this month, we learned homeopathy for emergency accidents, especially with like all the hurricanes that went on. We were
Hmm.
learning about like major, like broken bones, like just serious stuff, even infections, like cuts and stuff. So we learned, we had this, it was actually kind of a longer session, but usually it's just an hour. So we learned that. But the way Murphy's Law works is, Erica and Jen, you guys might have learned about first aid last week, but this week someone's going to walk in with pink eye, or, a sinus infection or whatever, because that's how it's going to work. It's never going to be what you just learned. And so Confidence Clinic is really where we bring a case. So last night we did, what was it? We did a case of a woman who was pregnant and she was having this terrible lower back pain every time she slept, and it would wake her up at 3 in the morning. So we teach you guys how to use this really cool book. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm holding up a Materia Medica and Repertory. A Materia Medica is like a dictionary that alphabetizes all the homeopathic remedies and their symptoms. And then the repertory in the back is like in reverse. It's all the symptoms and the remedies that are good for those symptoms. So we teach you guys how to like, okay, what are the symptoms? Find them in the repertory, identify those remedies, identify the top ones, and then go to the Materia Medica and pick out the best one that matches. So we kind of teach you how to fish. And then the last week of the month, we learn about 2 remedies. So like I just taught you guys Allium cepa. You guys kind of know a little bit of watery eyes, egg white runny nose. So like the more remedies you learn, the easier it all becomes. And I have some moms that have been there for, oh my gosh, at least 10 months. And they're like flying. They are flying. They are like, they're the ones in the group now. They're like, this is what I would recommend. And I looked it up and, like they're just so good. And it just takes a little 1 hour a week, a little bit of time, and you get really good at it. So
Very cool. Well, I am so grateful. Jen and I are so grateful for this work you're doing. And thank you for sharing all that about your programs. We don't usually have people share that much, but I think this is so important. So that's why we allowed this time for you to share all of that. So, ladies, you guys are going to have to check out Paola's stuff. We will put the links below to everything. Obviously, you can always reach out to me. Will you share your Instagram or social media? Where's the
yeah,
easiest place for people to like reach out to you quickly for
yes.
questions?
Yeah, people message me all the time, and I'm the one that handles my account. It's Paola Brown Homeopathy, just all one word. My first name, Paola Brown Homeopathy. Or you could go to my website, paolabrown.com, and I have, you can click to
All
my
the
social
things.
there. But I
Perfect.
do I do really try and teach a lot of really good information, and I have tons of free stuff on my website. So
Amazing. Well, you're doing awesome work, and we are so grateful for you as our listeners. So you guys go check out all of Paola's goodies, and just start diving in and learning. That's how we got to do all this. It's with what I teach too. It's like you just got to start with where you're at and just keep going. So Paola, thank you so much. You guys listening, please share today's episode with your other mom friends, other people in your life that may just be interested and or maybe they don't know anything, but you could be like, this could really help you. Maybe they're dealing with some health issues, things like that. And it's just a topic of conversation that, like we just don't hear about mainstream ever, 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 ever. It's definitely like, I always say not sometimes, a lot of times, like the natural stuff, it's like a secret world out there, you guys,
yeah,
even locally, like not to get on a tangent here, but I even feel like locally where I live, I'm like the natural, more holistic people. It's like, it's all word of mouth. Like you just to do
it
a
is.
search online is so hard. So this is why sharing this information, you guys hear this, like share it with 10 of your friends. Be like, hey guys, I don't know if this is of interest to you or not, but I thought you might like this because this stuff isn't talked about. So that's why I say that at the end of every episode. That's why this is so important. We just have to share information with friends and families. And again, maybe not everybody is going to be interested, but you just never know that you may have a friend of yours that reaches out to you later and is like, oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that episode with me because it changed my life. That's why we have, like, I just get chills saying that, like, because I hear that from people with different episodes. Are like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you brought this person on and talked about that. Or with the programs that we offer, like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have found you sooner because it's changed my life. And I know that's such a massive statement, but It happens all the time. I know Jen handles my email, right? She hears all the time from ladies that are like, oh my gosh, this changed my life. And so anyway, you guys, I get very passionate about this stuff. Anything in the holistic health space that keeps chemicals out of our bodies and all of that just makes us so much healthier. So Paola, thank you again so much. And thank you
Welcome. Can I say
all.
one
Yes,
thing just
yes,
before we
yes,
go? I want to say
please.
one thing. You're
Yes.
totally right. That's how homeopathy survived, as mothers were just sharing it. They were just sharing it with others. That's how it had the rebirth. And I just want to tell your listeners that it is your birthright as a mother to bring true health into your home. Like own that. That is what God or whatever your higher power is like. That is your role. That is your birthright to bring health into your home. So follow that, like that little intuition that you have to keep pursuing true health. So thank you for having me.
Well said, Paola. Thank you so much. See you guys back in a couple weeks.